Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. And little by little, we are all beginning to come out of lockdown around the world. And as you know, I do reject this new normal that we see repeated in the media. And I prefer to call it the new abnormal, which is what it is. But I do remain fascinated by how companies are adapting to new ways of working, retiring old processes and leveraging technology to thrive in a post-pandemic world. So a company recently appeared on my radar called Outform. And at Outform, their guiding philosophy is to dare to innovate. And they specialise in creating tangible consumer engagements that elevate, connect and humanise brand experiences. And in a nutshell, they unite leading experts in research, strategy, design, innovation and manufacturing who all work together to create unforgettable brand experiences. But as we know, the world of retail has been affected more than most. So I wanted to know how Outform are attempting to help put a bit of confidence and peace of mind back into the market with their iDISPLAY thermometer, which is designed to instill a sense of trust and safety in people across industries as they recommence everyday activities and public gatherings in a post-COVID-19 world. But I wanted to find out more about how they're finding innovative ways to do their part in flattening the curve and how Outform's non-contact infrared thermometers will enable customers to invite their shoppers back into stores, schools and workplaces in a cost-effective and efficient, safe way. So buckle up and hold on tight, because I'm going to beam your ears all the way to Surrey here in the UK so we can speak with Simon Hathaway, Managing Director at Outform, where we're going to talk about all this and much, much more. So a massive warm welcome to the show, Simon. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
So hello, I'm Simon Hathaway. I am the Managing Director of Outform in EMEA. I've got a background in agencies, and I've kind of worked pretty much in every discipline before settling in retail. Though having said that, I did a brief stint with Dassault Systems at kind of the bleeding edge of technology as their CMO. So I then joined Outform and run that business for them across EMEA, looking really at how, on the day-to-day, very much like any other managing director, focus on the kind of the work and the people and the money, but probably at my best when we are doing what we do very well, which is bring insight, technology and creativity to our clients.
Fantastic. And I love how you guys are combining design with state-of-the-art technology. But we are going to have a lot of listeners tuning in from all over the world and hearing about you guys for the first time. So can you tell me a little bit more about what makes Outform different from all those other companies in your space at the moment?
So I think we're probably a little bit of a hybrid. Our core business is still in services, and we kind of bucket those into three areas around, we would say, think, make and run. But it's kind of hard to define our competition in many of those cases because of the way that we do that. And so many of them, particularly if you look at sometimes we come against some of the big retail design agencies, they don't have that knowledge in the making and the running of these things. So those things, that's quite interesting. And again, similarly, we'll see that with the legacy shopper agencies, but sometimes we'll come across some manufacturers as well who will be more in the retail display area. So we have a slightly different model, and that is kind of also then grounded in our spirit of dare to innovate. And that does mean that we can bring technologies and understand how to use that in ways that most of our competition can't. And I think the differentiator in all of that is that we do have innovation hubs in Shanghai, Shenzhen, Tel Aviv, as well as here in the UK. And that really does mean that we can be very fast to market with some of the areas of things that we work in. And at the same time, so we've got that services offering, then we've got a product offering as well, and that's where we've brought that innovation to life, and then are selling what we actually are making. So we're making it accessible to other people. We started out with the iDISPLAY. We're now moving through to a full interactive collection of components that enable you to build interactive solutions yourselves for your stores or any other environment. And then perhaps more recently, obviously, the iDISPLAY thermometer, which is we hope will help people get back to how they workshop and play again very soon.
And we're both coming out of lockdown here in the UK at the moment, and areas such as retail have been hit particularly hard. And I read a few weeks ago, I'm not sure if you saw this, Primark's monthly sales nosedive from 650 million a month to zero. because they have no online presence at all. And it's such a difficult moment, and I think there is an argument that a recession is a great catalyst for innovation. So on that topic, what is the role of retail innovation in this evolving retail industry, especially moving forward, do you think?
I mean, I think if you look at it, retail more than any other industry is probably being disrupted by technologies and that have influenced how we all kind of shop fundamentally, right? So they talk about omni-channel. So if you like, the omni-channelification of retail means that anything that can be a shop now will be a shop, and that's where Primark have fallen foul. They've not kept up with that. Having said that, if you look at their cash reserves, they're in a fairly strong position all the same. But that digitalization of shopping behaviors means that any retailers who are not innovating will not survive. And I think the most important thing there is we've moved on from a lot of people have talked about the experience economy to the expectation economy, and now you kind of reset your expectations with every click, every visit, every download, and so that expectation, to keeping up with the expectation, is really the base of your innovative process. And it really becomes a challenge if you look at the sort of success of retailers as well. We're measuring too much on online versus offline, and that really is, I think, the big flaw here, that we now are in a situation where the omni-channelification of retail and how we do shop means that just measuring this physical store in the same way that you measure the online store is perhaps the wrong way to do it. And we need to start thinking about, if you're in the digital world, you'd be measuring yourself on pay-per-click, and perhaps in the retail physical space, we should be measuring ourselves on pay-per-experience.
And as retailers all begin to open, many are going to be desperately trying to get in revenue and hit the ground running as quickly as possible. So how can any retailers, especially if we've got any people from retailers listening, how should they be creating successful in-store activations, do you think?
I think the first thing to understand is obviously that level of what your store is meant to do. We are now in a moment where we have a new retail context. We've all learned, and in fact, it's been accelerated through the COVID process, that we can shop anywhere, and the buy now button is almost ubiquitous in almost every single channel that we're in. So we look at three behaviors of search, shop, and share. And so the first point is to understand that, and then to take that context into your retail environment if you're looking specifically at an in-store activation. And we build it around three types of budget, which we call time, money, and frustration. And I think most people get the money piece, and you'll get the time piece as well. And that's really increasingly interesting with COVID, right? Because you're having to plan to queue outside stores. Whilst you're in the store, that's great. But you're going to have some deadlines there as well. And then there's going to be frustrations. And that, we've all been to stores in the past where you've just had too much choice, or it's not been there. You've not had the messaging that you needed to make the decision. So you've left frustrated. Now we're going to see a new level of frustrations. And perhaps while we're all going to get back to how we used to behave in terms of the kind of the macro behaviors of going shopping, the micro behaviors of touch and things like that are going to become increasingly important. So I think those are going to be the really interesting plays. And we're particularly looking at how we start to create touchless retail experiences to make sure that people want to come back to stores, but also understanding that, they might not want to transact in the store at the same time. So that new importance of the measure of how you look at a retail environment as part of the omni-channel journey is going to become increasingly important going forward.
And one of the reasons I was excited to get you on the podcast today was Outform unveiled technologies at Euroshop recently. So I've got to ask, just for everyone listening, do you have any examples of the role that of innovative technology has to play in retail?
Well, I think, yeah, absolutely. I mean, as we've been talking already, this idea of experience and expectation is really high. So at Euroshop this year, we were lucky enough to launch the Interactive Collection. And most of that's driven by simple triggers, and they can drive any form of interaction. So we showcased motion, augmented reality, robotics, and voice. Since then as well, we've also pushed further forward with touchless retail, particularly around motion and gesture control, because those will all be things that are really important as we come out of the lockdown. And at the same time, how do we connect to other people's devices when they're in store? Because that's going to be increasing an area where you might want to drive a communication interaction when people don't want to touch things. And ironically, the C19 virus might just mean the resurrection of the QR code.
Oh, the resurrection of the QR code, man. Remember when that was the answer to absolutely everything out there?
Well, I was lucky enough to work at an agency that did the first virtual store in a Seoul subway. I don't even remember it. It was the poster child for how mobile is going to transform retail. And at the time, everybody would ask me questions. Is the QR code the future of retail? Is this going to drive everything? And we never really saw it happen across Europe. It was huge in Asia, but never really happened in Europe at the scale that we thought it might. But if you look at what's happening now, particularly with things like restaurants using it for menus, we'll start to see it more and more, I think, on fixtures in stores, because people feel far more confident to go in and use their own device to read something that they would have normally read on a bit of paper or touched on a piece of card when they're visiting stores. So I think we might just see that return.
Yeah, I think we're already seeing it, aren't we, as well? And things like boarding passes on planes. It's easy to have something on your phone, isn't it, than have an envelope full of paperwork.
And that's the great thing about that, is that obviously we've started to become aware of it. Obviously, that's in that case with the QR code on your mobile phone when you're checking into an airport. I mean, that's fine, but it's almost invisible, right? You don't really realise it's a QR code and how it's being used. It's just what you've got. And for me, that's one of the best technology, is when it's invisible technology. But yeah, that little bit of technology might be something we become more and more used to as we walk into stores, into restaurants, and just we want to click on the barcode just to, the QR code, just to make that connection to our own devices and drive the connectivity in store.
Absolutely. And given the current work from home, stay at home world that we've been living in for a few months, can you tell me how you've had to adapt to meet your clients' needs in these weird times, which I prefer to call the new abnormal rather than new normal? But is there anything you can expand and share on how you've had to deal with that?
So I think the first thing is to say that we were already set up to work from home, because our model has always been to have people close to our customers, either the brands or the retailers that we work for. So we were kind of really early adopters of Zoom, and we've been doing it for some time. So for many of our people who can work from home, that's not been a problem. Obviously, in some of our areas, think about design, technology, those have been more challenged, because you've got people who are in physical spaces having to work on stuff. But we've been pretty quick to put in social distancing. And I think one of the things that is perhaps most ironic for us is that we're now using some of the most sort of top-end virtual showrooming solutions for retailers ourselves. So prototyping, in fact, selling some of our product range, we're using virtual showrooms. So we're all wandering around with cameras and then demoing the products and things that we have on offer through the internet and through Zoom calls. So that, for me, is perhaps the biggest shift we've made. Having said that, a lot of our clients have continued as normal. Most people are expecting stuff that will land in retail for the kind of Black Friday and Christmas periods or holiday period to continue. So, our insight, technology and creative teams have not really stopped. And the engineers are all kind of working full steam ahead. So, yeah, that's where we've been. Beyond that, I mean, the innovation obviously has shifted. Everybody's had to pivot in some way. And we've just done that, obviously, most interestingly, with the speed we managed to bring the iDISPLAY thermometer to market, which we hope will be an opportunity to get people back into stores again.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because I think if we go back to the beginning of the year, what retailers were looking to leverage technology to solve problems back in January is completely different with their needs that they have right now, especially as we come out of lockdown. And like you just mentioned there, Outform recently released iDISPLAY, which I believe is a thermometer. But can you tell listeners a little bit more about that and the kind of problems that you're aiming to solve for retailers with that technology?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting, right? So for years, many retailers wanted to have clean stores, and that was their policy, and a clean store policy. And now they really, really, really need a clean store. In fact, it's a hygiene factor almost in that process. So most of the solutions we're now looking at are helping with dealing with those hygiene factors that people are going to be the basic expectations to visit a store again. The iDISPLAY thermometers is a device that you can sight at any entrance, so either to a retail environment, a gym, a workplace, any municipal type of space, and it will recognise somebody as they come up with a temperature. You move up, it will ask you to move to within a distance where it can measure you, and then it uses an infrared technology based on a German sensor chip to identify if you have a temperature within a certain tolerance, of course. And that will can do a number of things. It can either just set off alarm. It can just alert you to the fact that you may have a temperature or not. It can give you access. You can connect it through an API to a rotating door or barriers. And even in some cases, if we're looking at gyms and workplaces with facial recognition that might be used for entrances as well. So all those things are coming together, and it's proving to be incredibly popular.
I was going to say, I know it's early days for this technology, but what kind of feedback have you had from retailers?
They've all been very popular. I mean, obviously, their rush to start with has been plastic screens and all those sort of guards to keep people away. But this is starting to look at, well, particularly in areas where they've got 2 or 3 members of staff on a doorway, starting to be a way that they could get people back and not have that density of staff, but also give people, especially in smaller retailers, the opportunity to have something at the door, which is a very visible device to give confidence to people who are coming into the store.
And I'm glad you mentioned smaller retailers there, because I would suspect that for many people listening, they'll think this would be something that only the large retailers would be able to afford. What kind of price bracket does it fall into? Is there anything you can share around that, just so we can tell people how affordable it is for a wide range of different businesses?
So a typical iDISPLAY on a sample cost, they're about €1,700 for the base unit, which includes a wall stand. You would then add on different ways of looking at it in terms of the types of stand that you might want, say it's a child stand, a counter stand, or a floor stand. And obviously they get much, much cheaper as the prices drop down. So, and that's obviously the advantage for the bigger retailers, because you can obviously get them down to a simple price. But we do think that at a less than €2,000, it's a quite easy price point to get people back into your stores.
Excellent. And obviously we're both based in the UK at the moment, and we have an international audience that will be listening to us today. What kind of regions are you serving at the moment with this technology?
Well, Outform's a global business, so we are able to ship these globally. We are doing very well at the moment in North America with them, again across EMEA, either through our own direct sales or also through the reseller network. I mean, the device itself is obviously designed and created by Outform. We're using German technology in there, and the iDISPLAY solution is coming out of China. So it's already pretty much a global product, using the best of the current technology available to deliver the solution, and it's available globally.
I love how you've evolved to actually solve retailers' problems right now with this technology. But for any retailers listening that want to innovate more and want to turn challenges into opportunities, is there any kind of advice that you would offer?
I think we've all got to understand the new context. I mean, a lot of retailers were getting there anyway with the omni-channelification of retail, if you like, and starting to see how behaviours in store and online were changing and evolving. And we're going to see that in a completely different way as we go forward. And there's going to be 2 things I see. There's like the macro behaviours, which we've started to see change already, and then there's the micro behaviours. And if whether or not you're a food retailer or a retailer of product and brands, there's going to be those smaller things that are going to be really different and changing. So, the idea of being handed a pint, for example, is going to be a very different proposition, and people are going to need that confidence to return.
And I'm sure if I would have asked you on January the 1st this year what was going to be next for Outform and what were your plans, I suspect they might have changed and evolved and adapted over the last few months. But is there anything you can share about the road ahead for Outform?
So in terms of our kind of roadmap, there's not necessarily been a huge shift. What has changed is that we're seeing a new demand for our physical services as brands and retailers look to kind of reinvent in-store experience post-lockdown. And then obviously we've seen the rapid evolution of our own product lineup. So the iDISPLAY thermometers come through and shifting away from a lot of the interactive solutions we were delivered towards a more touchless based product lineup. But the other thing we've got, and I've not really talked about it much, and where we're investing in and have been for the last year, is the agency we run called the Shopper Agency, and that's a sort of digital first solution. So they are really looking at the behaviours of search, shop, and share, and how we work across e-commerce platforms. So that pivot was made about a year ago towards that core focus, and I think that is going to be a huge area of focus for us going forward. In terms of how we shift our investments, that's probably an area we're going to spend more and more of our time and focus, and it should become a real growth engine for Outform.
And I'm glad you just highlighted something there. You're saying now you're doing much less of the interactive in-store experiences and things like touch screens. Because yesterday I went to buy a train ticket, and obviously I was presented with that touch screen that I've used 100 times before. But for the first time, I'm questioning the use of touch screens. So have you noticed a change in attitudes towards things like that?
Well, I think obviously there will be a change, and people have to get their confidence back to go towards touchscreens. And we've got a number of devices, like there are sort of antibacterial solutions which we're going to bring to market. Because I don't think that we're going to see the end of interactivity in store. I think that will certainly continue. It's just going to be done in a different way. It's going to be activated in a different way. So that might be through motion or gesture, or increasingly voice. You know, we're all used to using Siri or Google when we're in our car, or Alexa when we're at home. So why could we not use voice to activate some of these solutions when we're in store or even buying a train ticket?
Absolutely. Well, I've absolutely loved chatting with you today. So, I mean, for anyone listening that would like to find out information about anything that we've talked about today, or just follow your progress throughout the year and the kind of things that you're working on, could you just point them in the best direction of where they can find you online and how to contact your team if they are left with any questions?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we're at outform.com. That's our global site. And there's a contact us page there where you can come through to me. There's also, you can sign up for the newsletter, which is great, gives you an insight of what we think is the best in retail innovation every week. And then if you want to hear more about the shopper agency, or read more about the shopper agency, as I say, then you can check them out at the shopperagency.com.
Excellent. Well, I absolutely love how you've evolved and adapted with the current landscape. And I'd love to stay in touch with you and maybe get you on towards the end of the year and see how things have continued to progress and the kind of work that you're doing there. Because I think we're just getting started with this thirst for new technology and innovation. So hopefully get you back on towards the end of the year. But more than anything, just a big thank you for joining me today, Simon.
Thank you very much. It's been great. And I'd love to join you later in the year.
Now, although Simon didn't give too much away on pricing, I did learn in the conversation after we stopped recording that in most cases the thermometer is available much closer to €1,500, and it's even further discounted with volume. And I think that makes such a big difference because it makes it possible for smaller businesses to get involved and leverage this technology as well. Behind the scenes, Outform uses lean interdisciplinary teams working in close collaboration with clients and helping them to solve their users' biggest problems. And in doing so, their user-centric, data-driven approach focuses on creating a seamless experience across different environments. What I love here is how they're creating these seamless experiences and solving problems first, but then using technology to make it happen and bring it to life. And the iDISPLAY thermometer is a great example of how they're solving problems with this touchless, frictionless and accurate method to temperature measurement. And within a matter of just 2 seconds, the iDISPLAY thermometer is able to read body temperatures and alert users and designated associates if they have a fever. So a big thank you to Simon for coming on and making me aware of that, and also chatting about the role of retail innovation in this evolving retail industry, how to create successful in-store activations, and examples of some of the technologies that Outform unveiled at Euroshop and the role of innovative technology has to play in the future of retail. But if this is your industry, I'd love to hear more about how you're evolving and how you're adapting to the changes ahead. So please email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com. My website, if you'd like to work with me, if you want to launch your own podcast, if you need help with your business blogs, is techblogwriter.co.uk. You'll also find over 1,200 interviews. And if you want to follow me on social, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, just look for @NeilC.Hughes. But don't just follow me. Send a little message so I know that you're a listener to the show too. Finally, I would love to get Simon on a little bit later on in the year. He's got something incredibly exciting to talk about, which I cannot reveal now. So we'll get him back later on in the year. But more than anything, just a big thank you to every one of you for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.